How can you use one core story with different angles for different audiences? This is what I talk about with my guest, Shanta Wilkinson, on this episode of the Speaking Your Brand podcast. More and more women are making an impact by starting businesses, running for office, and speaking up for what matters. With my background as a TV political analyst, entrepreneur, and speaker, I interview and coach purpose-driven women to shape their brands, grow their companies, and become recognized as influencers in their field. This is Speaking Your Brand, your place to learn how to persuasively communicate your message to your audience. Hi there, and welcome to the Speaking Your Brand podcast. I'm your host, Carol Cox. I hope you've been enjoying the episodes we've been doing around thought leadership. It started a few episodes ago, number 232, where I talked about, are you an influencer, an expert, or a thought leader? And then the next episode, 233, I explained 3 types of thought leadership models that I've identified. Those 2 episodes have been incredibly popular. I've heard from a number of listeners that those 2 episodes have really got them thinking about their own role as a thought leader and their desire to evolve from an expert to a thought leader. So definitely go back and listen to those 2 episodes if you haven't already. And so now we're doing a series with some of the women who've been in our Thought Leader Academy. Last week, we had Marisol Erlacher on the podcast. Today, I have Shanta Wilkinson. Next week, Cinda Schriffel. And then the week after that, Bessie Jordan. I'm really happy to showcase these women on the podcast because I'm hoping that it gives you a sense of the types of women that enroll in our Thought Leader Academy, the different types of businesses that they run, and the different thought leadership goals that they have. And really the one umbrella that they all fall into is that, yes, they have a business and they want their business to do well, but they also have a mission. They have a purpose to what they want to do in their business and in their life. And that's where their thought leadership message and their thought leadership project comes into play. Our Thought Leader Academy is open for enrollment again coming up very soon in September. You're going to want to get on the interest list at speakingyourbrand.com/academy. This is a small group. We like to keep it intimate because we really do create a trusted, safe place for you to explore your ideas, your message, and your story. And our goal for you in the Thought Leader Academy is really for you to think of yourself as a thought leader and to start positioning yourself that way within your business and within the speaking and other types of visibility that you're doing. You can get all of the details and sign up for the interest list at speakingyourbrand.com/academy. And if you have questions and want to see if it's a good fit for you and what your goals are, you're welcome to schedule a consultation call with us anytime. You can do that right on the same page, speakingyourbrand.com/academy. There's a button to do so. Now, let me tell you about today's guest. Shanta Howard Wilkinson is a member of our Thought Leader Academy right now. She's the founder of her own consulting company where she provides diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting and assistance to organizations that are implementing DEI strategies and best practices. Shanta has a background as a human resources consultant, and she was a lawyer. She worked with the New Jersey Office of the Attorney General and at a New Jersey law firm before she decided to pivot from being a lawyer into now doing her own consulting. And we get into her background and some of her early stories of when she was young and how we see now that that has led her to the DEI work that she's doing today. So what Shanta and I talk about in this episode is around identifying that core story for your signature talk, whether you're doing a business presentation, a training workshop, or a keynote talk. Having a story that informs why you do what you do and why the work that you do matters to you, and then by extension to your audience, can really help your audience to connect with you more. What you can also do is that you can have one core story, and then you can emphasize different angles of the story depending on who's in the audience and what angle makes sense for them. So that's what we dive into in this episode. You're going to love Shanta's energy and passion for what she does. I have so enjoyed having her in the Thought Leader Academy, and so I know you're going to love her too. Now, let's get on with the show. Welcome to the podcast, Shanta.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, I am thrilled to have you. You have so much energy and presence and charisma, and I have really enjoyed having you in the Thought Leader Academy and getting to know you over the past couple of months. And so I really want to dive into the work that you do in your consulting business and really where that passion came from, where this drive and this mission came from, because I think it will be helpful to the listeners as they start to think about the work that they do and maybe even pivoting or refining the work that they do to align more with the passion and the mission that they have. So Shanta, tell us about the consulting work that you do and who you do it for.
I have a diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting business, and it is a passion of mine. I enjoy it. My background is I served as a human resources consultant / manager for several small to mid-sized businesses in the Northeast region. Prior to that, I was a practicing attorney as well as the associate director of EEO and affirmative action for a hospital in New York City. And I would say that diversity, equity, and inclusion work is work that I found, and it also found me at the same time as I was going along my career journey. And I would sit back and I would see friends from law school and different people, college friends and high school friends. And you would sit back and you would say, wow, so-and-so seems like they really enjoy their job. So-and-so seems like they're really passionate about what they do. And I would often have times that I would question, am I passionate about what I do? Do I really enjoy it? But my career sort of went along a trajectory where I found that I was always gravitating towards the work that had an investigative side to it, gravitating towards the work that dealt with affirmative action matters, dealt with EEO, human resources, working with individuals, trying to come up with a resolution, mediation. I did court training mediation courses to get a certification in mediation. So coming up with a resolution, being able to see a problem and helping an organization, helping someone find a solution to that problem. So I believe that's how I went along this path and all of my different career opportunities that I had up to this date. And I remember maybe 4 years ago, sitting down and saying, you keep coming back to diversity, equity, inclusion. These are things that are important to you. These are tenets that have a personal connection to you and that you feel passionate about. And I was having this internal monologue with myself for several years. And then I said, this is work that seems so inspiring. You're able to align your mission with your personal mission with organizations that you care about and that want to do the good work. So it was sort of like a perfect marriage in between my interests, my background, every career opportunity that I had to date. So it was basically the perfect marriage of all of those aspects.
And so Shanta, so you've relatively recently struck out on your own, started your own consulting business to work with organizations. Tell us a little bit about the types of organizations who you most enjoy working with. What do the organizations look like? And then I guess more importantly, what does their executive leadership team and employees look like that they are excited to do the DEI work as well?
So far, I've been doing a nice mixture between for-profit and not-for-profit organizations. And I really enjoy working with both. With the not-for-profit organizations, I'm usually definitely passionate about the work that they're doing and the communities that they serve. So it's always great to see organizations that are out doing great work for the communities, but that are also doing that internal reflective work in-house to ensure that A, are they best serving their employees? And B, are they best serving the communities that they serve? So when working with board of directors for a nonprofit organization, they like to ensure that their leadership team is reflective of the community that they serve, that they're individuals sitting around the table that are also members of the communities that their services are reaching. And then there's that internal work that organizations like to do when looking within their staff and looking within their executive leadership in-house as well, just to make sure, are we reflective of the community? Are we reflective of the community we serve as well as the community at large? And then there's a saying when dealing with some of the for-profit corporations, they're also looking at it from a vantage point of, we provide these services to a customer base, to a consumer base, to a community, but are the individuals that's helping provide these services, are they reflective of the greater community at large? So it's great to work with organizations that are energetic about the work, that are committed to the work, and that also see it as work. And I once sat on a panel, and when thinking about the work and talking primarily to for-profit organizations, I try to look at it as, your reputation, no matter what your business venture is extremely important. And if your workplace is not inclusive, if the environment that you are cultivating in-house is not inclusive, that is just as defective as having a defective product. That can be just as detrimental to your brand as an organization and to your reputation as providing faulty or subpar service. So if you're putting out a great product to the community, but internally your workplace isn't inclusive, if your employees' engagement levels are not high, if your employees are not happy to go to work every day, if they don't feel like they are comfortable to bring their authentic true self to work, and that their authentic true self is also has a sense of belonging, that can be just as detrimental, if not more, than having a reputation for having a faulty product, a defective product, or just service that does not meet up to the expectations. So I try to, with each organization, I try to focus on that whatever your consumer is, whatever your consumer base is equally as important to ensure that your in-house, that your work environment is just as happy, engaging, and inclusive as the products that you put out.
Chandra, that's a really great point. And a few things come to mind. So I remember during one of our strategy sessions, our coaching sessions, that because we were kind of talking along these same lines, that I mentioned the Pepsi commercial that had come out a few years ago with, I think it was Kendall Jenner, I don't know, one of the Kardashian ones, and how it was so tone deaf because in the advertisement, she's like holding a Pepsi can, because obviously advertising Pepsi, and she's going up to like a line of police, like riot police officers in the middle of obviously a stage protest for this advertisement. And it's like, oh, here, just hand the police officer a can of Pepsi and everything's going to be fine. And then I think it eventually came out that the advertising agency and whoever was involved with it at Pepsi, there were no Black people or people of color, or I don't even know if that, I'll have to go check that, who were involved in the creation of this advertisement.
And you see that often. And it was something that you would see generations ago, where you would see advertisements that were in publications, Life magazine, Time magazine, and it was products that were geared towards a female consumer base. And it may be a woman vacuuming with a dress and pearls and heels on. And you can tell that this was, I'm assuming, during the era of Mad Men and the ad men on Madison Avenue. And there were no women sitting around the table. So the individuals that were putting forth this advertisement package for this product, in their mind, this is what women look like when they vacuum. This is what women aspire to be as they're doing work. So you can tell, you would see that generations ago, and then to still see it now, it's like there was not one person at the table who was able to say, this is tone deaf. This falls flat. This is totally missing the mark. This is inappropriate. So you see that often with some products and some advertisements and just some messages that are put forward and put out into the community that you say clearly there was no one who could sit at the table and say, this falls flat.
Exactly, Shonda.
This is not hitting the mark.
Yes. And obviously the DEI work that you're doing is incredibly important. And there's been a dramatic increase in interest of the DEI work for both for-profit and nonprofit, obviously since George Floyd's murder end of May of 2020. So over a year ago now. And that was, the big resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement, the protests all across the country. And so we definitely have seen this increase in that. And so, which is like great. Let's applaud companies for wanting to go in that direction. What do you feel what are a lot of them missing, or what are they missing that would be something that they could not easily correct, but that they could understand that it's not like, oh, I'm just going to check these few boxes and everything's going to be fine. What have you found is the work that these organizations really need to be doing?
And I think many organizations is just that they're failing to realize that this will be work and that this will be a journey, and that true transformation will take steps along the way, that patience has to be built into it, understanding, and that you have to be uncomfortable with acknowledging in a bit of humility. You have to be uncomfortable with acknowledging that as you're doing the work, as you're rolling up your sleeves and doing the deep dive, to really get a pulse in a sense of, how is your organization viewed internally? How do your employees feel about the working environment? Is it an inclusive work environment for all? Do individuals feel a sense of belonging? But as you're doing that work, you have to be comfortable with the findings, because, in order to really move the work along, you have to have a moment where you acknowledge your past and see how history has played a role in both your industry as well as the personal history in your business, industry as a whole, and society as a whole. Take a moment to do the present reflective work to say, this is where we're at now. It may not be pretty. It may not be great. And with anything in life, you may come in thinking, I'm doing great. We're hitting all the marks, but you have to have that humility and be able to withstand the critique to say that you're doing this great, but you can also improve in these 3 areas here. And a lot of organizations have to really position themselves to say that, you know, when working with someone, whether it's a DEI consultant, whether it's an in-house DEI director, officer, vice president, the goal and the role isn't to come in to say, this is what you're doing wrong and you are all horrible people and this is why. The goal is to say, and this is areas where you can improve. This is the work that you need to do to move beyond the great statements that were perfectly crafted last spring, last summer. Now moving beyond those statements and saying, this is the work that we're going to do. You have to put yourselves in the position from the C-suite on down, put yourself in a position to learn. But the only way you're truly able to learn is to humble yourself to receive that information. Say, we're going to find out things about our organization that we truly need to improve upon, but we're not defensive. We're not taking a defensive stand. We're taking a stand of humility, a stand where we'll say, you know what? We're ready to receive this information. We're ready to reckon with our past, acknowledge our present, and set a vision for our future, to look forward to where we want to be better as an organization, individually, and as a society.
Oh, Shanta, yes. I love that. And I love the word humility and really, you know, thinking about that as far as this work. Now, you mentioned acknowledgement, and I know that's the first letter in the acronym for your framework. So can you just give us a brief overview of your framework? Because that's one of the things you've been working on as you've been going through the Thought Leader Academy.
Yes. So it's been fun working with you and Diane and everyone in the Thought Leader Academy. That's one of the many benefits of the Thought Leader Academy is being able to work with a group of inspiring, supportive women that when they give you advice, they give it to you from a perspective where you sit back and you think and you say, okay, this works. This doesn't work. I like that suggestion. Thank you. Like, you know, we're together so consistently that we get to know each other's personalities. We get to know each other's platforms. We get to know each other's businesses. So as someone is saying stuff and as I throw out a suggestion or as I'm thinking of something, I can tell that someone on the receiving end is like, that doesn't really sound like you, or that doesn't fit you. So you're trying to go over here when we've gotten a sense of who you are. I think you need to focus on this. So when working with you and coming with my framework, my platform, you helped me develop the ACT acronym, which stands for, the A is for awareness and acknowledgement, that an organization needs to do the internal reflective work, really roll up their sleeves and say, okay, this is where we're at now. And we acknowledge a need for change. And then the C in ACT is communicate, that you have to take it that next step further, be transparent, communicate that commitment to change, communicating that need, whether it's both to your staff, whether it's to your stakeholders, whether it's to your consumers, whoever you need to communicate that need for change, that you take that step of being transparent, being intentional, and communicating that need. And then the T is transformation, is that an organization will then do the transformative work to get from where they are currently to the vision of where they want to be in the future. But that first step is that acknowledgement. And I look at the acronym from both a personal standpoint and an organizational standpoint, because we all, while doing this work and other work that calls on all of us to be reflective, that we all have to take a moment to have that acknowledgement, that awareness, like, okay, I see the need for change. I see how I've been doing it thus far. Not that it may not necessarily be appropriate, but that there's a different way of approaching it. This is the why behind it. This is why my actions are offensive. This is why my actions are falling flat. This is why my beliefs are harmful. This is why my unconscious beliefs are damaging. So taking that step, whether it's personal or on an organizational standpoint, to acknowledge, then the communication, because acknowledging it and doing it internally, that doesn't benefit anyone. You also have to communicate. You have to be intentional and transparent and letting everyone know this is where we're at as an organization. Because one of the key things about communicating, especially depending on what your industry is. And we just know it's human nature. As one goes, so does the others. And if you're in an industry where you step out front and you're saying, you know what, we're committed to this, and these are the steps that we're going to take, and this is what we're doing, a lot of your peers, a lot of your competitors, whoever else is in your industry, they look at that bold step that you take and they're like, you know what? We're going to follow suit, because no one wants to be the odd man out. So you kind of are being able to be innovative and a thought leader yourself in getting the movement, moving it forward. And then that transformation, sitting, doing the work, and you get a sense of gratitude and gratification with any process, internally, individually, or globally as an organization, when you do the work and when you see the transformation happening and you're saying, we did that. Like we're a part of the change. Like, and we're all in a stage where everyone wants to just play their part, whatever their part is, and whatever the mission or whatever the charge is, everyone wants to play their part in moving all of the work forward. So acknowledgement, communication, and transformation.
I love it. And this is why we love acronyms, because they're so easy to remember. All right. So Shanta, as I mentioned when we first started off, you obviously have a passion and a mission for the DEI work that you're doing. And you can see the threads throughout your career, even as an attorney in HR, before you started your own consulting business. And I know during one of our coaching sessions, I asked you some questions about, like, you know, what were you like as a little girl? Like, do you see how the work that you do now and the importance that it plays in your life? Do you see a thread going back to when you were younger? And you realize that there was an incident, a situation that happened. And so can you share that story with us? Because I think it's so helpful to kind of to think back to these particular stories, especially from when we were younger, and then share them with our audiences, because it makes us more relatable and it makes it memorable. So I want, for the listeners who are listening right now, listen to Shanta's story. I would not be surprised if going forward, now you associate Shanta with this particular story. So go ahead, Shanta.
And when we first started working together, I remember sitting, and this probably was week 2 or 3 in the Thought Leader Academy, and the conversations were coming up about personal stories. And I was like, I don't have a story that's interesting. I don't have a story that, I thought I had stories that may relate to DEI work, but I just didn't have anything that moved me. And then as you provided me with the prompts and I started to think back, and I thought back at young Shanta, and I recall an incident where my mother promised me a Cabbage Patch Kid doll. I am of a certain age, so I was of that era where Cabbage Patch dolls were all the rage. And, I wanted a Cabbage Patch doll that was the doll to have. And, with any little kid, if you tell them they're going to get something that's in their mind, and especially if you tell your kid, we're going to go to, at the time, the store Toys R Us. You're going to go to Toys R Us after school to get a Cabbage Patch doll. So all day I was excited. Probably several days I was excited because I knew on this particular day after school, we were going to go to get the Cabbage Patch doll. So we get to the store. I'm excited. I probably ran down the aisles looking for the particular aisle that had the dolls. And I remember going down the aisle, looking up and down. And I said, So I looked and then I walked away. And my mother, she just kind of she stood behind and didn't know where I was going. And I walked up to a young lady who was a sales representative, and I asked her if I could speak to the manager. Now, I was about 7, 8. So clearly I saw my mother do that at some point. I can't take full credit for requesting to see the manager. But clearly I had seen adults in my life do that prior to myself. So I requested to speak to the manager. She got the manager. My mother, again, kind of stood close, but far enough to just see. I think she may have asked me like a question, like maybe what's going on? What are you doing? As the manager comes out, I say to the manager, hello, my name is Shanta Lynette Howard, and my mother brought me to get a Cabbage Patch doll. And as you can see, and I think I did like a motion, like, as you can see, I'm Black, and I came here to adopt a doll, because that was the thing with the Cabbage Patch Kid dolls. You were coming to adopt a doll that came with the certificate, a birth certificate, and everything. So I explained to the manager that I was looking for a doll that looked like me, and that there were no Black dolls at the time, on the shelves at least. And he told me that, and I'm quite sure at that time an order was made, and it probably, if they received 100 dolls, you may have gotten 20 probably that were of color because there were other dolls besides black dolls and white dolls. So there probably were 20 of color. And by the time we got to the store, the 20 were gone. And he assured me that a new batch was coming in and that he took my mother's information. And upon arrival of the new batch, we got the phone call that my doll was there, Danielle, which I named her. And we went to pick up Danielle when she arrived. But I knew at that young age that it was so important to me. And I wasn't able to articulate it there. I just knew that I wanted a doll that looked like me. And along my journey into young adulthood, even adolescence into young adulthood, there were other instances where representation was so important to me. I couldn't articulate it. I didn't know that a desire for representation would lead me to law school. I didn't know that I would always seek out representation in other avenues, even based on the artwork that I have on my wall, the dolls that I did by my children. It was as I got older that I started to really see that thread and see how it connected from young Shanta to Shanta today, that realized that this is important. And as a young girl, my mother promised me that I would be able to go to get this doll. And I was so excited. And I didn't question it. I knew it just should be. I knew that if I'm going to get a doll from Toys R Us, that the doll that was going to be my adopted doll was to look like me. Like it just should be. It just should be so. I had no reason to question it. I had no reason.
It's like common sense.
Common sense. So then to get there and to say, there are a lot of dolls here, but not one that looked like me. And there was nothing inside of me, because we've done that before. It's people where you'll say, oh, well, they don't have, well, I really wanted this shoe, but they don't have it. So I'll get this. Like there was nothing inside of me that was going to acquiesce, that was going to say, oh, they don't have the doll that you want, but maybe you should get this one. No, like I knew enough to say, okay, I know what I wanted. I want to know, why you don't have dolls that look like me here. And more importantly, when will you have her? And if you won't have her, will I be going to another store to get her? Like there was no other way that it could be. It was like, I may leave today without a doll, but at some point I'm going to get a doll, but not any doll, the doll that looks like me. And once working with you, I realized that was a story that could apply to but it was doing the work, again, that internal reflective work, the work that I work with organizations to do, but it's also doing that work. It's you helped me find my why in a time that I thought my why was something else. Like I just assumed my why was be like, oh, well, I enjoy doing this work, or I like it, or it's nice, but it really was, this is what's important to you and has always been important to you is representation. It's always been important to you to ensure that everyone feels like they belong. It's always been important to you to make sure environments are healthy and that people are engaged and happy to be in an environment. And it's also important that communities that are served they're better served when people who look like them are making the decisions that affect them. And that's all the representation. I may not have been able to articulate it at 9. I may not even been able to artfully articulate it at 29. But as I progressed, I was able, and with your help, to see that thread as to why that mattered and why that story could be applied to my signature talk and to my framework, because it is my why. It is my big why. It is what motivates me to do these things, because representation matters.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, Shanta. Thank you so much for sharing that story. And there's a couple of things that jump out at me. And I know we talked about this previously, but I think this will be helpful to the listeners too. So with the story that you shared, depending on who your audience is, what the topic is or the angle is for your talk, you can pick out or you can emphasize different aspects of that story. So your story is still there. So for example, if you can emphasize the representation and belonging piece of it, like you just talked about. There's another angle, which is about advocacy. So you being willing at a very young age to speak up for yourself and to advocate for yourself. And obviously you're doing that now with the DEI work, with the organizations that you help. You're advocating for this work and helping them advocate for for their employees as well. And then the other angle is kind of what we talked about with that Pepsi commercial, where who are the decision makers? Who is at the table? Who is in the leadership positions where they're making that decision? Because when that inventory was ordered for those Cabbage Patch dolls at the time, who was the one doing the ordering? Who was, at the company, the Cabbage Patch doll company, deciding what kinds of dolls, what colors dolls, how many dolls to make, what stores are we sending these to? All of those. So you see how your stories can stay the same, but what points you emphasize can shift depending on the audience.
And you also gave me a great way to view it, even in terms of innovation, because Cabbage Patch dolls, they changed over the years, but you look at how other toy companies progressed. Mattel. And this is I have a Cabbage Patch doll now from my daughter. A dear friend purchased her a Cabbage Patch doll, probably because the friend knew my story. But Cabbage Patch dolls are still great dolls. They're still around. But when you look at how other toy companies progress, Mattel with Barbie, and you can find a Barbie that is reflective and representative of there are Barbie dolls with natural hair. There are Barbie dolls who are individuals with disabilities. When we were younger, Barbie came one size. Eventually, there were different shades of Barbie, but at one point there were different shades, but they were all the same hair texture. And then eventually Ken came along eventually, and there were different shades of Ken, but there was still this uniformity with Barbie. But now you go into a store or you go online, and I sit back and I'm just like, wow, like any young girl or boy, any person can go in and find the Barbie that speaks to them, that is reflective of them, or that they just want to play with. And it's just amazing when you see how that innovates, how you have one company that was able to kind of see diversity matters, representation matters. And we know what our consumers want, and they want dolls, they want toys, they want figurines, because Mattel creates more than just Barbie. They want figurines that are reflective of them. And the buying power are the parents and the children, but the parents want to see that as well. They want to make sure that when they're purchasing, they're spending their money, they're spending it with a company that values them. And I know you value me as a consumer if I'm able to see products that are reflective of myself and my children. Then that's how I know you value me. So there's so many ways that you helped me look at it from that viewpoint. Like, okay, there's the innovation aspect, the advocacy aspect. There's so many different aspects. And working with you with the Thought Leader Academy helped me take a story that one didn't even come to my mind. And then two, when it did come to my mind, I was so narrow in scope at first. And you helped me see how that story can then be applied in different aspects of my speech for different audiences.
Well, great, Shanta. Yes, the innovation piece, that is brilliant also. And I love that example. And so, Shanta, you are definitely a gold star student so in our Thought Leader Academy, one of the things that you all learn is how to create your signature talk using our framework, which, we had the poster board with the Post-it notes set up into the 3 acts. And so you came to one of our coaching sessions and you had your whole board done with all of the Post-it notes on it. And I was so impressed with that. So, Shanta, can you tell me a little bit about kind of what that process was like for you, what the process has been like being in the Thought Leader Academy so far, and what you're excited about going forward?
That process was fun, but I would like to start with just the amount of information that we get from the Thought Leader Academy. There's so many resources, informations, the weekly check-ins, the weekly calls, the webinars, the LinkedIn webinar, and how to create a webinar. There are all of these additional resources. There are all of these additional resources that really allow you to dig in. Like I take notes. If I showed my notebook, I would not, because my handwriting is beyond. It's just, I won't show it. I was gonna say I just won't show it. But I take notes, copious notes. I am engaging. I'm listening to what everyone else is saying. I'm listening to what you are saying and the other coaches, and I'm processing that all. I look forward to doing the homework. The workbooks are such a valuable resource. And I must stress that I actually saw the framework the Signature Talk framework, an aspect of it, prior to even being in the Thought Leader Academy. For one of my very first presentations before I signed up for the Thought Leader Academy and before the Speaking Your Brand Summit, I downloaded one of the frameworks and I used that in a presentation. And I referred to that. And then from that, then doing the Thought Leader Academy, getting the framework, getting the workbook, and just really, because I really wanted to get the most out of this experience. But it's not hard to get the most out of it because there's a lot that you do get. But I really wanted to get the most out of it. So I wanted to ensure that I set aside time to work on the framework. I wanted to set aside time to do the poster board. I'm still changing it because when I initially did the poster board, I was going on a different route with the 3 A's. The act didn't exist. So I have since changed it to the act and being able to play around and everything makes sense. For the listeners who haven't seen the poster board, they may not know what I'm referencing in terms of like Post-it notes and stickies and how I move everything around. But there is such a nice framework that is visual and it allows you to really go at a pace that is comfortable for you, but really digging in. And as you're digging in and doing the work, you're refining not just your talk, but you're refining how you think about things. You're refining, and all of that is just practice for when you do presentations, because you're able to have a conversation, even learning, like I was that person that was, when I did a PowerPoint presentation, I was trying to jam everything into one slide. Like each slide was like way too much information. And then you see, but while doing the process, you're retaining so much of the information while you're doing your signature talk, while you're working on the poster board, that you realize that you don't need to put so much in the slide for you to see, because you have the key points. And as you're doing the work, it's like the homework. As you're doing the homework, you're retaining the information and you become more confident when you speak. And then you can have a slide presentation that has slides that are not overburdened with information, because you know you have it, and you have it mentally. You have it because you've done the workbook. You've seen this stuff quite a few times. You've refined it. You've narrowed it down. And you're more comfortable with what you have to say and how you say it. So the experience has been great. I mean, there's so much about it that I could talk about ad nauseum, from just being able to work with, to be in a group with the Academy with other female entrepreneurs and to learn about their businesses and to learn from them, because we get so many great tips and insights. Even yesterday in our call, I got something that was really profound that I wrote down that I will use. And you feel there is no judgment. It's a very safe space where everyone feels like there's no question that's too silly. There's no question that's too, if you present a question, someone, if it's not Diane, because she usually has that answer right off, but someone is going to have an answer for you. And whether it's just another way of viewing things, whether it's something else to consider, it's just such a supportive and encouraging and inspiring group of women. And women, we connect outside of the lessons. We email each other. We set up conversations to speak. So there is this network, but it's a supportive network. It's not necessarily, it's how can I help you? How can we do this process together? And we're in this together. And with COVID, the world has gotten so much smaller in a sense where we're all virtual. You're meeting people from other states. You're getting to forge relationships with people who you have not had the opportunity to meet in person, who you may not meet in person, or you may years from now go to a conference where you get to meet them in person. But this setup is just so conducive to working together, to learning and growing together. So it's been a great experience. Usually when you do something for a long time, you're like, oh, when the end date comes, I'm gonna actually miss it when the end date comes along. I will miss it. I'm not looking forward to the end date, and because I also feel like I'm getting a lot to the process. And I think sometimes people look forward to the end date because they think at this date I'm gonna have this. We're getting this during the process. Like, we're getting the package that will be tied in a neat bow throughout the process. So you're really like, once we're at the end, this ends. So there's a bit of, you're not eagerly anticipating that, because it's like, oh, this ends, huh? Oh, wow. What's next?
Yes. It's not like the end of senior year of high school or college where you're like, you can't wait until final exams.
Yeah, it's like, oh man, I'm going to miss this.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Shanta, this warms my heart so much to hear that. And I completely agree how supportive the women are in the group. And this is one of the things that I feel so grateful for is the women who end up becoming our clients and join really are, so supportive and encouraging and inspiring and motivating to each other. And so you are definitely one of those women. So I'm grateful that you've been a part of our community. Shanta, where can listeners find you online? Where can they connect with you?
You can connect with me via my website, which is Shanta Wilkinson Consulting, LLC. And I can also be found via email at Shanta@Wilkinson Consulting, LLC, and LinkedIn as well, which would be under Shanta Howard Wilkinson, I believe. So, yes. Those are my socials.
Fantastic, Shanta. Well, I will make sure to include links in the show notes so that listeners can connect with you there. And I am so appreciative of you. And thank you so much for taking the time to come on the Speaking Your Brand podcast.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you again to Shanta for being on the Speaking Your Brand podcast and for being in our Thought Leader Academy. Our academy is open for enrollment again very soon. Get all of the details and get on the interest list by going to speakingyourbrand.com/academy. Again, that's speakingyourbrand.com/academy. Until next time, thanks for listening.